Hello, everyone, and welcome to Edinburgh University's live stream tonight on YouTube. We are bringing the Latinx Artist Spotlight. We have some local guests, some representatives from Edinburgh that are here today to share their culture, their artwork with you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Leslie Sotomayor, who's going to be your host for tonight. She will introduce each of our panelists for this evening, and then each panelist will share their artwork, share their culture, and share what they're passionate about. And then at the end, we will have a brief Q&A session. You're welcome to enter your questions into the YouTube chat, or if you're on our Zoom meeting, you can enter it into the Zoom meeting as well. So welcome, everybody. Here is Dr. Leslie Sotomayor and the Latinx Artist Spotlight.
Thank you, Chris. Buenas tardes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this Latinx Spotlight with local artists from the Erie community and the Erie region. This is the last event that Edinburgh is hosting that for the duration of Latinx Month, which started at the beginning of September 15th, and tomorrow, October 15th, is the last day. There is also another event that's going to close out the local Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month in collaboration with Erie Arts and Culture. And hopefully we'll be able to share the link to that at some point during the chat and the YouTube. My name is Doctora Leslie Sotomayor, and I teach art education here at Edinburgh University in collaboration with Dr. Stephanie Diaz Morel and Dr. Sheila de Lorenzo Peña and Dr. Terrence Mitchell, the Diversity and Inclusion Chief Director. I am very happy to have been a part of a committee and community building within the Edinburgh campus and abroad with our larger community in highlighting Latinx and Hispanic representation and contributions to our community and our society in the Northwestern Pennsylvania area. So we have three fantastic special local artists. The first one is Armando Reyes, who is a woodworker artist and the owner of the Lake Erie Woodworks Company. Lourdes Hasso, who is an artist and educator at the Erie Neighborhood Art House. And Freddie Haumen Mikey is an architectural wood carver. And we will go through each artist presentation. Well, they will share a little bit about their process, their creative practice and studio work, and their identities throughout their art making process. And after the culmination of all three artists going through their presentations, we will open it up to a Q&A time. So the first one up is Armando. If you would like to start us off, sharing a little bit about yourself and your creative process.
Thank you, Leslie, first of all, for having us here and allowing us to share our work. So what I do is I work in a part-time as a business owner, building custom furniture. And hold on. So yeah, it basically consists of custom furniture, cabinetry, anything and everything made out of wood. That's what we normally deal with. And so that's been a passion and hobby of mine for over 10 years now, so 10 or 15 years now. Came from my grandfather when he immigrated here from Mexico. That's basically how he found work. They came to Chicago in 1956. They settled in Chicago, and he started working as a cabinet maker and doing things for people in their homes. And he passed that down to his 7 boys, and they in turn passed it down to their children. My father passed it down to me, and none of them did it as a profession, but definitely as a hobby. They all had their basement wood shops where they built little things for either for their house or whatever the case was. And after moving to Erie and buying our own home, I kind of ran into the same situation and wanted to build things and fix things up here. And started acquiring tools and building things little by little, and eventually it turned into more of a passion, and learning about furniture and the history of furniture and furniture making, and I continued on from there, and it eventually grew into a side business, and that's where it's at today.
Okay. Do you want to say a little bit more about the images that we have here that that you've shared with us today?
Sure. So the first piece, well, this one here on the screen now is a bathroom vanity that we completed for a customer of ours. This is a very sort of prototypical type of thing that we do, or that we would like to do, is where we kind of take people's ideas and just sort of blend them with things they have, and kind of just bring people's visions to life. Less of what I do is my own work, or sort of my own creative ideas that I bring to life. It's more of working with people and their ideas, and kind of creating those things together with a customer, and bringing what we can do and what they want, and sort of putting those ideas together. So the bathroom vanity was a good example of that. The table there is sorry, we're going back and forth. The table there is a live edge walnut table, which eventually became a display. It was actually commissioned as a display for a local bicycle shop. They wanted something to sort of showcase bicycles periodically throughout the year. And so the idea went from basic bicycle stand to custom live edge walnut table. And so that was a piece there. It's just one big walnut slab on a metal base. The picture here with the drum is also sort of a side business of a side business, if you want to call that. So another thing I do is build custom drums. So here's a custom snare drum. That company is Lake Erie Drum Works, which is obviously a spinoff of Lake Erie Woodworks. And again, this is a sort of melding of two of my passions, which is woodworking, which involves building the actual drum shell, and music, which I've been in and around music as a musician for even longer than I've been woodworking. So this was a great way to kind of put those two passions together, and not only build to be able to build things, but then to give them to musicians, so I can take my art and then hand it off to somebody else who then creates their own art with it. I think is something real special.
Fantastic. And I apologize. I neglected to give a little bio about Armando's work before Armando began to talk. So I apologize about that, Armando. But like you've already touched on, that you're an artist, musician, and working with the materiality of wood. And maybe later on with our Q&A, we can unpack a little bit about through Lake Erie Woodworks venture, how you began to also host what you refer to as the Table Saw Supper Club,
Sure.
which is connecting woodworkers from all over Erie,
Sure.
different skill levels, and sharing of ideas and resources, correct?
Correct. So when the business actually grew large enough to need its own space, where it couldn't just do things out of my basement anymore, we moved into a new space, and I actually share the space with a friend of mine. His name is Brian Geary, who's also a woodworker and furniture maker. We kind of put our resources together and split the rent and share tools and things like that. At the same time, working with Freddie, who's here with us today, we knew that we wanted to use our space not just as like a a place of business, but a spot where, you know, we can open it to the community and offer it to other people. So the one thing we wanted to do was to create a group, like a local group where we can have monthly meetings, or it ended up being monthly meetings for anyone in the Erie area who is interested in woodworking, and whether they're professionals like myself or Brian or Freddie, or just, you know, basic beginners, you know, people who barely have any tools to work with. We wanted it to be an open space for people to come and like you said, share ideas and learn things. We try to do demonstrations and, you know, ask questions and answer people's questions. And, you know, anytime you put together a group of like-minded people, you're gonna learn something, hopefully. And that was the whole goal of creating that group, which we call the Table Saw Supper Club. And you know, from there, the idea has also been to eventually offer classes, which we've done so far. So another venture that, you know, was started was the Lake Erie School of Woodworking. That's something that's in its very beginning, but hopefully is going to grow into something where, you know, we can offer classes on a regular basis from, you know, beginner classes up to, you know, I wouldn't say expert level, but, you know, people who are more far advanced, learning, you know, more advanced techniques and things like that. Our problem is we don't have a very big space right now, so we can't have that many people at one class, and we don't have enough tools to go around for, you know, a large amount of people. So again, it's something, it's basically in its infancy right now. We did have one class in February, and in March, obviously everything shut down. So that's where we've been since then. But we're trying to keep things up. You know, I do small, like short YouTube videos of, like, you know, basic kind of woodworking things, and that's where it's at right now. And hopefully that's something for us to grow in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Armando. And I'm sure that there's a lot that we can unpack when we enter our Q&A section towards the second half of our programming. But thank you. So next I want to move on and introduce Lourdes Hassel, who's a mixed media artist focusing on social justice and the experiences of Mexican immigrant women in the United States. Born in 1983 in Acambra, Guanajuato, Mexico. She immigrated at the age of 3 with her parents and her 2 sisters to the United States. And she grew up immersed in the vibrant Latino culture of her working class Chicago neighborhood, where she participated in Mexican folkloric dance performances, communicating her messages in Spanish to many of her non-English speaking community members. So Lourdes, welcome.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for having us here today. I'm going to read to you in Spanish, and if you don't understand it, there's a point to it. Nací en Acámbaro, Guanajuato, México, en 1983. En 1986, mis padres decidieron traerme a mis 2 hermanas y a mí a Estados Unidos gracias a IRCA 1986, firmada por el presidente Ronald Reagan. El 6 de noviembre de 1998, después de tanto tiempo y dinero, por fin había llegado mi número y mi cita con inmigración, y fue cuando me hice residente permanente de los Estados Unidos. 2 años después, Bill Clinton firmó the Child Citizenship Act of 2000. En 1901, oficialmente me hice ciudadana de los Estados Unidos. Todo el proceso solo tomó 15 años. Me crié en La Villita y Brighton Park en Chicago, Illinois, donde la cultura mexicana es sobresaliente. Mis fotos reflejan el orgullo que tengo hacia mi patria, a la vez mis obstáculos como mujer inmigrante viviendo en el estado que define el panorama político. You can see some of my pieces here. I would like to speak about, sorry, I'm trying to get used to this. This is one of my pieces. It's called Ignorante. I don't know if you can see what I have. I have intentionally put mixed media onto my photography. I went to Columbia College in Chicago, where my major is photography. I received my bachelor's degree of art only because I knew that I couldn't afford to get my master's or further on my education. I also decided to be an educator, knowing that I will not be able to realistically be an artist. And I did not want to be what you call a starving artist. I did not see that in my life. I did not want to be living that life, knowing that my parents sacrificed so much to bring me to this country, to give me a better future. I moved to Erie 13 years ago, I believe, trying to maybe do the same thing my parents did, move to somewhere else that I knew I could give a better future to if I ever had children, and I did end up having children. I did stop my career for a while. You can say I wanted to teach, I wanted to be a mentor to children, and I am now. I work at the Inner City Neighborhood Art House. I've been there for almost as long as I've lived here. I am associate program director there. And I also I'm an instructor for photography and computer art. And just recently, about a year ago, did I decide to do art, to become an artist, to call myself an artist. It's been a process. It's been an identity crisis, I would say. How do I create my art? It's a day by day. We all know what's going on in the political climate right now, the uncertainty of immigrants, the uncertainty of women's rights. When I create my art, it's for me. Honestly, I don't do it for others. It's been my therapy. So yeah, I don't know what else to tell you, Leslie.
How about if you talk a little bit about the images that are behind you in your screen?
So I have only two. This is supposed to be a triptych. This is my take on Hear No Evil, Speak No Evil. You can see that one. Most of my images have a double meaning. For instance, the one with the maxi pad on the eyes, it's just to show you the ignorance of people with immigrant women, and just the lack of taking women into consideration with, equal pay, with just being blinded. I think it also has to do, I have this identity crisis going in my head right now, where either I'm blinded through, how do I say, I'm blinded because I choose to be ignorant with what's going on. And then I also think it's how the perception of others towards me personally, not necessarily everybody. I just think it's ignorance. And I think the best way that I can describe it is how ignorance is bliss. If you don't know of the bad things or what's going on that's wrong, then it shouldn't bother you. You're happy, nothing bothers you. But to me, it's a double standard. I have the other piece, Ignorante. I took it back to its embroidery. I hand stitched Ignorante, and I also have the stereotype of what, I don't like to use the word, but indigenous Mexican woman. I've been these stereotypes. I've have this, I'm a powerful woman, and I have had this other stereotype of, oh, you're a Mexican indigenous woman and you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't have a say-so in things. But then it's also my way of like, this is how I feel. I feel like I can speak, but it's also other people's perception of me of you're not allowed to speak. So a lot of my artwork has double meaning both ways, I guess.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm sure that we'll unpack that a little bit further with the second half after Freddie's presentation. Thank you, Lourdes. So next I want to introduce our last panelist, Freddie Haumen, Mikey, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Freddie. He's an ornamental and architectural woodcarver and wooden objects conservator, coming to the United States in 2012. Aside from hand carving tools that he made for himself, he also brought his sensibility, creativity, skills, and expertise that he accumulated with patience and observation, impeccably mindful of detail in his work and of his daily living. Growing up in the city of Ayacucho, the Peruvian capital of the crafts of Freddie, he inherited an appreciation of his cultural heritage, a syncretic product between Spanish and local cultures. At 9 years old, Freddie began learning wood carving from master carvers, where he then developed his own technique to design, carve, and conserve intricate pieces in the Baroque, Rococo, Gothic, and Romanesque styles. So thank you, Freddie, and welcome. And I believe that Freddie is also in his studio, so that he's joining us from, so we are able to see a lot of some little pieces of your work and the tools that you use in your studio space.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Freddie. My last name is Haumen. It's a Quechua word. And my second last name is Malki, which is also a Quechua from the Peruvian Andes language. And I am an artist. And I think you said everything what it has to say.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about your studio space and that you're in right now, and your creative process, what you do and how you go about doing it, your approach?
I think as this is what I do understand about Latinx or whatever it's called. Voy a hablar en español. ¿Está bien, Leslie?
Sí, está bien. Yes.
¿Tú lo puedes interpretar, por favor, Chris?
Okay, I will do my best to interpret Freddie as Freddie goes through. Yes.
Como iba diciendo, creo que es un conversatorio acerca de Latinx o Hispanic, lo cual yo personalmente no entiendo y no me identifico con tales términos porque desconozco completamente lo que significa. Yo me identifico como peruano, si me preguntan, y si se me apersona alguien y me dice, ¿eres latino? Y yo le digo, yo no sé lo que es latino.
Okay, espérate, déjame traducir eso. So Freddie is explaining how, although this event is marking Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month in the United States, he doesn't necessarily understand nor partake in the terminology and labeling of Latinx and Hispanic, and identifies as Peruvian.
No porque no entiendo, sino porque no me interesa realmente entender lo que significa.
It's a correction that it's not that he doesn't understand the terminology, but he has no interest in understanding or being a part of the terminology and labeling of Latinx and Hispanic.
¿Cuál era tu pregunta, Leslie?
Mi pregunta
¿Mi estudio? Estoy actualmente en mi estudio. Este es mi santuario, es como yo me refiero a mi espacio de trabajo, lleno de herramientas, lleno de ideas, lleno de diseños y lleno de muchas ideas.
So Freddie refers to his studio space as a sacred sanctuary space that he houses his design and his tools and his making process. A lo mejor puede hablar un poco sobre qué clases de objetos es que tú haces en tu studio. What types of objects do you create in your studio?
Yo creo de todo lo que mis manos pueden crear y todo lo que mis manos pueden ver, desde lo más complejo, desde lo más complicado, desde lo más detallado hasta lo más simple, y es un proceso lento.
So Freddie is saying how he creates everything and anything that his hands can create and that his hands can see and imagine, and that it is a slow process, but one that he fully indulges in.
Yo estoy comprometido con mi arte desde que soy niño. Soy un artista a tiempo completo y yo nunca lo entendí como un hobby y tampoco entiendo que es un hobby, porque mi trabajo es mi manera de sustentarme económicamente y espiritualmente, y así es que yo amo lo que hago. Y
Freddie is a full-time, considers himself, he is a full-time invested artist in his work and in his studio process. He does not consider his studio practice a hobby or anything of the like. It is part of his spirituality. It is part of his full-time premise and his how he earns a living and maintains himself. ¿Sigue?
Muy buena interpretación. Me gusta. Y hago de todo, como te decía, puedo hacer desde lo más complicado hasta lo más simple. Hago tallado en madera, he sido entrenado también en lo que es conservación y restauración de obras de arte, desde pintura a objetos en madera hasta objetos exquisitos.
It's not only the creating of new works, but it's also the conservation of woodwork and paintings.
Wooden objects.
And wooden objects, yes, gracias.
Pero también a la vez soy un artista que desarrollo distintas disciplinas como retrato, pintura, fotografía, y etcétera, etcétera. Y mis obras han sido exhibidas en el Perú en las más importantes galerías y museos, y también a nivel mundial en muchas partes, en muchos países.
So Freddie's work is interdisciplinary. It's prolific, where he is working with painting, with wood carving, with pictures, with photography, carving, and it has been exhibited throughout Peru in very prestigious galleries and museum spaces, and internationally as well.
Creo que no sé qué más puedo decir.
Okay, and podemos ir más en la segunda etapa. We can any questions to learn more about Freddie's technique and process can also be further impact with the Q&A. Gracias, Freddie.
O si puedes mostrar las fotos también, no sé, creo que había fotos. No sé.
Yes, if we can, if we're able to show at some point the images of Freddie's work, that we may be able to see more of the detail in the images through the virtual platform, Chris, that would be fantastic. So we'll see if we can get that up too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so thank you, Freddie. So now let's shift and open it up a little bit. As we, have heard a little bit from Armando, Lourdes, Freddie, a little bit about their creative process, their identities, how they choose to self-identify, and their reasons for doing so, we can maybe have some interesting dialogue. So I invite you all to use the chat or just to simply speak up, to engage with our panelists. And Freddie, since Chris was able to bring up one of your images here, that looks like a work in progress. Is there anything that you would like to say about this? Describe it a little.
Sí, por ejemplo, esa es una obra hecha para un cliente privado, para una mansión en Pittsburgh.
So this is a work in progress for a commissioned mansion in the Pittsburgh area that he's been working on. Sí.
No estoy trabajando actualmente, es una pieza ya acabada. Lo trabajé en el 18-19.
Okay, so this was a work that he previously was commissioned for and finished in 2018-19.
Me costó aproximadamente un año elaborar esta pieza. Es una pieza cuyas dimensiones son 10 pies de altura por 8 pies de ancho.
So it took approximately a year's time to complete this particular art wood carving, and for the mansion in Pittsburgh, and the dimensions were approximately 10 feet tall by 8 feet wide.
Y el proceso fue como se hacía en hace siglos atrás. Dibujo a mano, el diseño es a mano y las herramientas son sencillas, gouges, herramientas para tallar a mano y básicamente eso es.
So for the mansion wood carvings, the process was an old-fashioned process of doing the design by hand drawn, and then using tools to carve away and create the wood carving. And the labor intensive, that took them about a year's time. And this is another piece, I believe, ¿verdad, Freddie? Otro mixed media.
Es una instalación mixed media que fue elaborada basada en aspectos sociopolíticos en el Perú. Es acerca de la violencia sociopolítica durante los años 1980 a 1995 aproximadamente, durante ese periodo.
So this piece is part of an art installation mixed media piece where he's talking to the violence of social political unrest between the 1980s and 1995, roughly.
Sí, aproximadamente. Entonces es un reconocimiento al sufrimiento y a las violaciones constantes que las mujeres sufren en cada intervención o violencia sociopolítica en muchos países, especialmente sudamericanos y en muchas partes en el África y en Europa sobre todo, donde las mujeres son perpetradas sexualmente por aspectos que ya es sabido. Entonces era una exploración justamente para identificar eso.
So this work engages with the violations of women, specifically centering around that are common in South America, Europe, and Africa, and the social, political unrest and violence towards women and women's rights. And that might be something to unpack as well, maybe next. Gracias. Okay. So So now I would really like to open it up to the chat and anyone who would just like to speak up and comment, offer a reflection or a question for Armando, Lourdes, or Freddie.
I have a question here. This is Chris. I'm at the Edinburgh University tag. Sorry, I had to wait for my son to stop crying before I could ask a question. For all the artists, it's interesting how you you pour your own culture and your own passion into your artwork. But I was kind of curious. It seems like a lot of art has been very collaborative. Now, do you see yourself working amongst other individuals of similar cultures, or do you prefer working by yourself? Or if you're working on something that so say you're working on something that shows a social justice project or women's rights, do you prefer working with just kind of like the segment you're looking for? Like, how do you go about either collaborating or working by yourself?
Does anyone?
Yeah.
I'll let you know. I can answer that too. I'm still considering myself as, sorry, my teeth are so white that they keep blending and it's driving me crazy. But anyway, I take it, I'm still learning as how to identify as an artist. So I think in the future, just for different, I would like to venture out into other mediums that I'm not familiar with, that I would like to venture into, you know, with some engineering, some mechanical stuff that I would love to collaborate with others. I think I would like to finish off the artwork that I have in my head, and I just need to get it out before I think I collaborate with others. But I think we're lucky enough to be where we're at, that there's actually a lot of the colleges and universities that are willing to help out local artists that I think I will be venturing out. But as of right now, I need to finish my stuff first.
Freddie, do you do any collaborative works con otros artistas in your?
Yo personalmente, sí, estoy colaborando con varios artistas. Una de ellas es Alex Antis, con quien estamos trabajando as a residency program with our West Bayfront community, and also with through the Erie Arts and Culture. Yo realmente no tengo ningún problema trabajar con personas que son de diferencias culturales o diferencias de medios artísticos. Para mí lo más importante, yo no los veo desde un punto de vista si son diferentes a mí. Yo los veo como artistas, y eso es como lo que son para mí. Y ya, no tengo ningún problema colaborar con otro artista.
Okay, so Freddie was just explaining in Spanish how he does not mind and enjoys collaborating with other artists, and that culture, racial or ethnic heritage and backgrounds is not what he's looking at. He's looking at the work of as artists coming together and collaborating and working together in that spirit. Armando, you had mentioned that the Table Saw Supper Club is a form of collaboration. Is there any other forms of collaboration? You had mentioned about the school that you're trying to build and the classes to afford accessibility to other people in the community who want to learn, or who already know woodworking but want to refine or come together with other members of the community to work together. Can you say a little bit more about what collaboration looks like for you in your works? Especially, I'm thinking of the drums that you're commissioned to create, because then that's bringing in another form of collaboration with music.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of my collaboration, when I reach out to, be inspired or to work with other people, I find that I just look for others who have an experience or a knowledge that I don't, and I try to, learn as much as I can from them. So, whether it's about a friend who's a historian, and he has a ton of knowledge of Mexican Americans in the United States, and he can inform a lot of questions that I have, and just answer a lot of things that when I have questions, I can lean on him as a as a resource. And so that's what I look for when I look for people to collaborate with, is somebody who has an experience or an idea, or they work in a form or a medium, or a technique that I don't, and I just want to learn from them. So that's the kind of collaborator that I like working with. As far as the Table Saw Supper Club, one of the things that's happened recently, with all of the focus on social justice and race and ethnicity, and and how we're how our voices of minorities being listened to, and are they being listened to, and are they being involved, and it's happening in all sorts of places. We're looking at corporations, and we're asking, are minorities a part of your executive board? And that goes all the way down to to nonprofits, and our minority voices being heard in a lot of places. And so as we've started to ask a lot of those questions, it's actually been brought up in the woodworking community in the media side of it. So in magazines and websites and those kind of things, like they've also actually started looking at it from that perspective, and they've realized that the woodworking community is typically older and white, and there have been people who have trying to figure out how we get more minorities involved in woodworking. And are there people out there who we're not highlighting, whether it's women or people of color? So our Table Saw Supper Club typically reflects that sort of portion of the population, is typically older and typically white. So yeah, it's been, but again, like Freddie said, it's never been about that in that group. We just see each other, we all have the same problems, we run into the same issues when we're doing our work. It doesn't matter who you are, but a lot of questions have at least been brought up, and I think it's a positive step forward. And then in the drum world, that's been my favorite sort of collaboration, because again, I get to sort of just be like a sounding board for people, and they tell me what they want, they tell me what they want to see, and it just becomes a challenge for me. Like, I think a lot of what drives me is the challenge of trying to get things that are just imagined, so thoughts that are in people's heads or in my head, and try to bring them into reality. And figuring out that process is really what is motivating for me. So even if it's very simple, like, how do I make this box? But the challenge and the sort of, bringing a concept into the physical world is really what motivates me. And doing that with drums really amplifies that, because it takes somebody's vision of what they think looks good and sounds good and performs well, and it gives me that challenge to say, okay, how do I make that happen? And so that's been my favorite collaboration so far, is working with drummers and musicians, and getting to allowing me to bring something into the world that then lets them bring their own thing into the world too, in the form of their music.
Fantastic, thank you. Do you have any documentation of the use of your drums with these collaborations where they are commissioned and used so that can be shared with how they sound and the music that comes out of it?
Yeah, actually, so the one thing I tried to do, which has been difficult because the music industry has been basically, decimated at this point due to COVID and, people not being able to perform. But the few times that I've had the chance to go see some of our artists, because most of them are local, I've been able to go out and take video and just kind of stand behind them in their drum kit. And I did start a YouTube channel for Lake Erie Drum Works. And so we've uploaded a few videos of sound samples and sort of like testimonial videos. Yeah. We have about 5 endorsed local drummers who took the time to sort of do a little video and talk about the drum that I made for them and why they like it and that kind of thing. So yeah, we did start a YouTube channel. You can hear what they sound like and what they look like and what people think about them. So.
If you could share that in the chat, maybe.
Sure.
We'll pull that up at some point, but thank you. So I'd like to open it up. Is there anyone that would like to either post a question or a comment or reflection in the chat that I would be more than happy to read out loud, or if you would like to speak up and introduce yourself to the artists here.
Leslie, solo para aclarar, ¿me escuchas?
Sí.
Solo para aclarar, si estoy hablando en español no es por arrogancia ni nada por el estilo, es creo también por el contexto en el que estamos, entonces, entonces hay que hablar en español, esa es mi idea, ¿no? Pero claro, te agradezco también que estás de intérprete ahí, lo cual es muy valioso.
Well, sí, ¿quiere también entonces decir lo que acaba de decir en inglés o que yo traduzca o no, nada?
No, está bien, no.
Está bien, okay. Dr. Stephanie Diaz Morel, maybe you had a comment or question?
I did. Hi everyone. I'm Dr. Stephanie Diaz Morel, and this is my husband behind me, Jarian. Thank you for all of the artists who came and presented. I learned a lot of wonderful information. And so my question, I'm going to ask it in English and in Spanish because I like Freddie's message of how these kind of conversations kind of naturally occur in Spanish sometimes, and Lourdes also shared in Spanish. So I'm just gonna follow in that, and I feel like that's the right direction to head in with this. So my question is about how has it been being an artist in Northwest Pennsylvania? Now, of course, all of you shared a bit about your heritage, about how you identify, about your culture, and how that influences and intersects with your work, either directly or indirectly. And I am a new transplant to Northwest Pennsylvania myself, so it's been a process here. So I'm going to now ask the question in Spanish as well. Mi pregunta para ustedes es ¿cómo ha sido viviendo tus experiencias aquí en Erie, en Northwest Pennsylvania? Todos explicaron un poco de sus herencias y cómo su cultura y sus experiencias viviendo aquí, viviendo en sus países de origen, en la cultura de sus padres y de generaciones previamente, cómo les ha impactado un poco su trabajo como artistas, pero ¿has tenido algunas experiencias particularmente con la zona donde vives ahora que está influenciando tu trabajo o cómo es para usted la experiencia de vivir aquí?
Was that directed at one person or just to all three? Stephanie, I'm sorry.
Anyone who feels that it would be pertinent to explain, yeah.
Awesome.
I can go ahead and answer some of it if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's been positive so far. Like I said, I just came out as what people call emerging artist because everybody, especially in the art world, has to have a label. So I'm an emerging artist. And I think it's been positive, surprisingly positive. And I think it has to do a lot with the political climate, with, who's in government and everything that's going on. I think it just falls into where it has been positive here in Erie. How do I explain? I have a hard time putting my artwork out there in just a way that in my culture or in my background, there has always been this fear of showing your art or fear of showing your voice. So I think I've been happily surprised that it's positive in the art world. I am afraid, to be honest, to show it outside of the art world in Erie, just because I don't know what the response would be. I don't know, in a magazine or in a museum, or not necessarily like in art world. I don't know how it would be accepted. I'm not ready for the backlash of racism. I'm not ready for the comments of people outside of the art world. I just think it's been positive here in Erie, and I'm happy about it. But again, it just falls into how, I don't know, there's fear, at least for me, to still put the rest of my artwork. These are the two pieces that I have that I feel comfortable showing. I have other pieces that I think read better, and I want them to be viewed more in a private setting than out into the world, just because I'm not ready for what's to come, I guess.
Hablando un poco de identidad, yo la verdad no sé qué significa identidad y tampoco he buscado saber qué significa identidad, pero sí estoy seguro que lo tengo y estoy feliz por eso, a pesar que no sé qué es, y porque no voy a perder el tiempo sabiendo qué es identidad. Y en cuanto a mi obra de arte, yo siempre trato de contextualizar el espacio social, el espacio geográfico y el espacio cultural e histórico en el cual estás coexistiendo, conviviendo con otras personas, para que de esa manera la obra de arte pueda llegar. Yo no necesariamente, no me gusta necesariamente explicar qué significa mi obra de arte, porque ya pierde el sentido. Porque al fin y al cabo, en mi opinión, por supuesto, ¿para qué vas a explicar tu obra de arte si estás condicionando lo que quiere decir? Simple y llanamente, mi percepción acerca de una obra... Oh, disculpa, Leslie.
No, nada, yo no he dicho nada. Dale.
No, para que puedas interpretar, no sé si...
Ah, ok. Bueno, a lo mejor entonces voy a necesitar que Lourdes diga, doctora.
If you want, I can help interpret that.
Yes, please.
We can share the responsibility, sure.
That would be great.
And I like the way Freddie explains things in Spanish. It's very poetic.
Yes.
So Freddie stated that as far as identity is concerned, that he doesn't really know what identity is, in the sense of that he himself has an identity, but hasn't worked out what it means for, what does identity mean, essentially, right? What is this concept? And then when it comes to talking about his art, and I'm sorry if I'm simplifying this, Freddie, you did again a beautiful job of eloquently explaining it. And when you say it in English, it just sounds so less poetic than it does in Spanish, right?
I think you missed it a lot. What I said.
Sure.
Sorry, but what I said is, and I will say in English. Lo que dije básicamente es que no sé es que no me interesa realmente buscar el concepto de identidad, porque no es necesario para mí, es una pérdida de tiempo personalmente. Lo más importante es que yo siento mi identidad. Y no tengo que justificarle a nadie sobre eso, porque al fin y al cabo es mi identidad.
Okay, so let me try to translate this. Again, it's difficult because there's so many different meanings in Spanish. He's saying that he thinks it's kind of when it comes to identifying identity, that he hasn't searched for himself. It's like not worth the time, right? Because he has time spent on other things instead. But he does know his own identity. And again, I'm not saying it correctly, but if you want to add, Leslie or someone else.
I think, yeah, no, I think that I think you're hitting at the gist that it's not necessary for him to have identity labels and an explanation and as a means of validating or contextualizing his artwork or who he is as an artist or human being in order for his work to be understood, or maybe understood is the right word, but consumed and appreciated and taken in.
Y lo que yo estaba explicando un poco de mi obra de arte es, yo no necesito explicar porque es igual, es perder la esencia de tu obra de arte si vas a explicar qué significa lo que estás haciendo. Entonces estás completamente como llevándole a tu mundo, al público, para quién es tu obra de arte. O sea, no tiene sentido explicarle. O sea, la idea es que el público interprete lo que para él es tu obra de arte. No importa si lo interpreta de una manera o de otra, eso ya no es mi problema. Es el problema del que está recibiendo el mensaje.
So it's saying that once you put your artwork out, once it's out of your studio, once it's created and out into the world, it's not your responsibility as the artist to have to explain it, contextualize it, or give it meaning, but it's out and you've let it go, right? You've let it go into the world, and however that is being consumed and the meanings that are extracted by our various perspectives as individuals, that's what it is, and we don't need to manage those expectations or meanings.
Condicionando. Porque no me gusta condicionar lo que yo quiero decir. Porque si no estás completamente, en mi opinión, por supuesto, estoy descontextualizando completamente lo que es una obra de arte desde mi propia manera de ver las cosas. Entonces, pero eso sí, siempre manejo la parte de que la sinceridad ante todo de mi obra de arte, y que no es lo mismo una obra de arte si he empezado ahora y si lo acabo en un año. O sea, no es lo mismo. O sea, ya cambia completamente todo el bagaje interpretativo en un mes, en 2 meses. Entonces ya no es sincero. Por eso justamente como explicar una obra de arte es completamente ridículo para mí. No vale la pena.
Exclamación para eso, Freddie. Exclamation. I completely agree with him, and to be honest, it's my life goal.
Not to have to
explain my art. What is it? What's behind it? To be honest, this is what makes me nervous, having to come into a panel discussion and explain my art, when it's like, how do I explain to you my 37 years of my history in these 2 pieces? You can't, and every time somebody asks me to explain it, it's always different because it just is, aside from my ADHD and my OCD and all these other problems, but I hate that you have to explain something. One of the main reasons why I became a visual artist is for the fact that I didn't have to explain myself.
Exactamente, Lourdes. O sea, somos artistas visuales, entonces, como tal, tienes que manejar códigos visuales para enviar un mensaje. Porque si no, entonces, ¿qué estamos haciendo?
Well, and I think that in the same way that when we write, we express, right? Writing is a creative act. It's an art form. So in the same way that we use words to create, we're using our studio process with visual making, whether that's painting or mixed media or wood carving or sculpture. In that creating, that is the language that's at play, is what I'm understanding that we're saying here, right? That and so because of that, there is no need to further create meaning because the art is the meaning.
Ujú.
Una de las razones por las que yo no estaba de acuerdo de continuar la exhibición en Edinburgh era justamente por eso. Llevar o mover las fechas era completamente como no ser sincero a mí mismo y ser completamente hipócrita para yo enviar un mensaje que estoy pensando, que estoy pasando en ese momento, cuando mi pensamiento, cuando mi percepción dentro de 10 meses, dentro de 6 meses, va a ser completamente distinto. Entonces, ya no es sincero. Entonces, ya no es una obra.
Present, right, it's being present in the moment. We have to wrap up because we're actually out of time, but there was one question that Patrick had posted in the chat to all of us about us having children and being parents and caregivers, and he's saying it's beautiful how you expose them, our children, to the arts and humanities and bring them into your studio spaces and different projects. As parents, how do you identify your children's creative talents and then nurture it when it comes to the surface? And I'm not sure if we're going to have time to unpack that fully, but does anyone want to share a little bit of what that could mean before we wrap it up and end our session today?
I'll just talk a little bit about it. So we have 2 children, and we definitely see their artistic side come out. And I think it's just important the way we feel as parents is just having an open mind. And, at the end of the day, art is just expression. And, as long as we can just let them express themselves. So my son has taken an interest in like music and playing piano and violin and all of these different things. And it's not a matter of, how often we make them practice or how often they have to rehearse. And, it's not that. It's just, letting them find an interest and just allowing that creative outlet to just be open. Our daughter is constantly drawing pictures and writing notes and, taping things to the wall just all the time. And it's not like, we say, well, that's an interesting choice of color, or, we're not sure what that shape is, but, just let them be, just let them let that creativity just take them wherever it takes them. And as they grow older, they'll find a path, and maybe they'll continue and maybe they won't. But, it's just something that, as artists, we don't want to be confined into a box. And so we feel it's important to not do that with our kids when we see their creativity come through.
Sure. So allowing that space. And I also would add to everything that you just expressed, Armando, is, for me, it's also embodying, right, who I am in the most honest, transparent, and sincere ways with my children above all, who are the most important people in my life. And so by embodying my creative forces and power, because that's what I see us, that's what I consider myself to be with my creative acts, is powerful through them. Embodying that is a modeling for my children, and however they choose to interpret that for themselves, right? So fantastic talk and conversation with Lourdes, Armando, and Freddie, and all of you who have joined us this evening. Thank you very much for your time. This will be accessible online, and I will share that link once that happens. Thank you so
Can
much.
I interrupt you for a little bit?
Absolutely. Go
Leslie?
ahead, Lourdes. Yeah.
Can I mention how, and I think this is also with like the thing that you had, café con leche, how we have so much to say that to give an hour to this topic or even all the other topics, it's almost like a shortening or kind of like a cutoff, and we still have so much more that I know that other people wanted to say or have questions with, which my suggestion would be to also bring it out how Edinburgh can see, or anybody else can see, how much of an interest that there is, that an hour shouldn't have to be a cutoff, especially when we're starting to start a conversation. So just to point it out there, we can see that everybody's interested. Make note, make it longer next time, because I really want to keep talking with you guys.
Yeah, fantastic. And also for us to have more of these spaces and platforms, right, for future conversations that anyone is empowered to initiate. And I invite you to think of that in your everyday practice, and to invite us in, to think of us as a community that can invite each other into these spaces. So fantastic.
Solo lo último, como Lourdes estaba interesada en explorar otros medios, ella está bienvenida a apoyarme. Estoy haciendo una obra public art, wood carving piece. Estoy empezando la semana que viene. Entonces, estás invitada, Lourdes, a un poco probar carving tools y mucha fuerza, y ya pues, nada más, una invitación, si es que quieres explorar
Gracias,
otro medio.
Freddie. Sí, con mucho gusto.
Genial, genial. Okay, bueno, muchas gracias a todos. Thank you everyone for joining and participating and being a part of this conversation, and to future ones, right? Pa'lante.
Yes.